He served 15 years in law enforcement. He wore the badge, trained rookies, and kept the peace. But today, he had a gun pointed at his face for filming a crime. What happened to America's promise of liberty and justice for all? When a black retired officer tries to expose the truth, the very system he once protected turns its sights on him. This isn't just about a camera, it's about accountability. About a man who stood up not just for himself, but for all of us. If you believe in the Constitution, if you believe no one is above the law, this is a story you need to see all the way through. Leave a comment letting us know you are watching from the very beginning. We read everyone, because truth doesn't whisper, it demands to be heard. Marcus Bell hadn't worn a badge in over 7 years, but he never forgot the weight of it, 4 ounces of metal and a lifetime of responsibility. He still woke up at 5:30 a.m., drank his black coffee from the same chipped mug he used on patrol, and prayed for a country that felt like it was slipping further from its promises. It was a quiet Tuesday. The sun had just started to warm the concrete on Main Street, and the flag in front of the county courthouse hung limp, still as the air. Marcus walked alone, his phone tucked in his vest pocket, its camera ready, not for drama, but for defense. He wasn't some activist with a megaphone. He was a grandfather, a widower, a veteran of streets that had once felt safe. But lately he'd seen too much. Reports that didn't match the footage. Voices silenced. And that same look in officers' eyes he used to have when he was told to look the other way. He never imagined he'd return, not as a brother in blue, but as a witness. As he approached the back lot of the sheriff's department, he noticed 2 officers leaning into the trunk of a civilian's car. Something felt off. He knew that posture, the shuffle, the quick glance over the shoulder. And so he did what every American has the right to do. He hit record. What happened next would test not just his courage, but the very meaning of the oath he once took. The phone in Marcus's hand wasn't the latest model. The screen had a small crack near the corner, and the camera lens had seen better days. But it didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be honest. He stood still, about 30 feet away, outside the marked boundary line of the sheriff's lot. There were no signs that said no trespassing, no gates, no warnings, just gravel, faded paint, and a silence that was about to be broken. The 2 deputies, both white, early 30s, were leaning into the open trunk of a silver sedan. Marcus zoomed in slowly. He saw one of them drop something inside. Small, quick, too deliberate to be accidental. He'd seen it before. In 2004, a fellow officer in Atlanta lost his career and his freedom because a dash cam caught him planting evidence. Marcus had testified in that case. He never forgot the way that courtroom smelled. Sweat, truth, and fear. But now, it was him standing behind the lens. One officer noticed him. "Hey, what are you doing?" he called out, stepping forward. Marcus didn't move. "Recording from public property, First Amendment. You interfering with an active investigation." "I'm 30 feet away, officer. You're on camera. Be careful what you say next." The second officer approached faster, hand on his holster. "We asked you to stop filming." "You can ask," Marcus replied calmly, "but the law doesn't require me to obey." Then came the moment that would freeze time. The officer drew his firearm. It was swift, practiced, and reckless. The barrel pointed directly at Marcus's chest. "For your safety and mine, put the phone down," the officer ordered. Breath clipped and sharp. Marcus didn't flinch. His voice, firm but measured, carried across the lot like a gavel slamming on truth. "I am Marcus Bell, retired, badge number 7473, 15 years of service. I trained men like you, and I never taught them to fear a phone more than a felony." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the birds had stopped. The officer hesitated. His partner looked unsure now, nervous. The phone in Marcus's hand didn't shake. Not an inch. "I've got a pacemaker and a grandbaby who's still learning to read," Marcus said softly. "So if you're going to pull that trigger, you better be sure you're right." For a moment, they all stood frozen, time holding its breath. And then slowly the gun lowered. Not because of fear, because of realization. The younger officer took a step back. "We didn't know you were law enforcement," he said. You still don't, Marcus replied. Because if you did, you'd know that what you just did, what you almost did, has nothing to do with knowing the badge and everything to do with respecting the law. The two men turned without a word, walking briskly back to the sedan. Marcus kept filming, not for likes, not for followers, for truth. Because if a man who once wore the badge could be threatened for filming a crime, then what protection did any citizen have? He stood there for a lost minute, breathing steady, heart loud, but calm. And then he whispered into the mic, "The difference between justice and injustice is whether we look away." He turned the camera to his own face. This is what courage looks like. And he walked back to the street, not as a man with a camera, but as a citizen defending the Constitution with every quiet step. Marcus sat alone on a bench just down the street, his phone still recording, though now aimed at the sidewalk. He hadn't stopped the video, not because he needed content, but because he needed evidence. His hands, once trained for a firearm, now trembled from adrenaline and memory. That look in the officer's eyes, it wasn't just aggression, it was confusion, panic, like a man who'd been told all his life that control meant safety, and suddenly, someone stood outside that illusion, unafraid. A small crowd had begun to gather, nothing large, mostly quiet onlookers from nearby stores and apartments. A woman, maybe in her late 70s, stepped closer. "You okay, honey?" she asked, southern accent thick with concern. Marcus gave her a nod. Physically, yes, but something broke today. She sat beside him. "You used to be one of them?" He sighed. 15 years. Patrol, training, internal review board. I left after a boy ended up in a hospital bed, and no one wanted to ask why. She reached into her purse and handed him a napkin, folded 3 times. "Truth's a dangerous thing when folks been taught to look away," she said. Her words struck deeper than the drawn gun ever could. He looked up. The officers had vanished from view, back behind the wall of brick and procedure. But Marcus knew something most people didn't. The fight rarely ends with the moment. It begins there. He reviewed the footage again, frame by frame. He saw the glint of the object dropped into the trunk, the officer's eyes darting up, the raised gun, the hesitation. He clipped the video into a short file, titled it "Protect Implant." He sent it to a contact, an investigative reporter he trusted from a case 3 years back. Then, he opened his old contacts list, former cops, lawyers, veterans, citizens who once stood with him. And then, he made a decision. He turned the camera to his face again. "If you're watching this, I need you to remember something. The badge doesn't make you right, the truth does. If they did this to me, a trained officer, a man with nothing but a phone, what would they do to your son, your grandson, a stranger without a voice? I never broke the law today, but they almost broke the oath they swore to protect it." He uploaded the clip. Within minutes, it began to spread. Within the hour, his phone lit up with messages from former partners, some in support, some in silence. But one name caught his eye, Lieutenant Raymond Davis, his former supervisor. The man who once told him, "Bell, sometimes doing the right thing ain't worth the price." Now Lieutenant Davis had sent a message. It was only 4 words. "We need to talk soon." Marcus stared at the screen. The weight of what was coming pressed on his chest. Not fear, but the understanding that the next step wouldn't be taken alone. There was something bigger under the surface, and someone didn't want it to rise. The coffee at Red's Cafe tasted the same as it did 20 years ago. Burnt, watery, and oddly comforting. Marcus stirred the cup out of habit, not need. The bell over the door jingled softly and he looked up. Lieutenant Raymond Davis had always walked like he was half a step ahead of trouble. Even now, grayer and heavier, he moved like a man scanning every room for secrets. They didn't shake hands. Davis sat down without asking. "I saw the video," he said, eyes never leaving Marcus's. Marcus leaned back. "Figured you might." There was silence, long, uncomfortable, the kind of quiet that only exists between 2 men who know each other's past too well. Davis finally broke it. "You remember the Ralston case?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Boy found unconscious behind the rec center. Broken ribs, empty pockets. Officers said he tripped, but you and I both knew. Davis cut in. We buried it, like a dozen others. The words hung heavy in the air. I didn't come here to confess, Davis added. I came to warn you. Marcus frowned. There's more at play than just those two hotheads in the law, Davis said. You're poking into something bigger now, and some folks don't like cameras, even when they're not rolling. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket, slid it across the table. What's on it? Marcus asked. Complaints, internal memos, video clips that never made it to court, from departments all over the Tri-County area. They scrubbed them, digitally and politically. But someone made backups. Why give it to me? Davis looked tired, old in a way Marcus hadn't seen before. Because I should have done what you're doing years ago, and because they won't come after me. I'm already compromised. But you're still credible. Marcus gripped the drive. You're not giving me a favor, he said. You're handing me a storm. Davis smiled, thin, sad. That's what truth always is. They left the cafe separately. It wasn't safe to be seen together. Not anymore. Back in his car, Marcus plugged the flash drive into his old laptop. Dozens of files, videos, audio logs, whistleblower reports stamped closed, no action. He clicked on one. A grainy clip showed an officer twisting a man's wrist behind his back. Off camera, a woman screamed, "He can't breathe!" Marcus paused the video. The pattern was all too familiar. Not just misconduct, but immunity. He opened a notepad, started taking names, dates, badge numbers. This wasn't about a single case anymore. This was a system, a network, one that thrived in shadows and silence. His phone buzzed, unknown number. Stop digging, Bell. This won't end well. No name, no reply. He stared at the message for a moment, then, without hesitation, deleted it. He turned on the camera again, pointed it at himself. The more they tell me to stop, the more I know I'm close. This isn't just about one gun or one man with a badge. This is about everyone who's ever whispered, "Don't ask," when they should have shouted enough. He hit record, and the truth once again found its way to light. The sun hadn't risen yet, but Marcus was wide awake. His living room was dimly lit by the soft blue glow of an old laptop, now humming with files too dangerous to keep hidden. Every folder, every file name was a choice: protect himself or expose the rot. He took a breath. Then he selected all the video clips, zipped them, and uploaded them to a secure cloud. The password was simple: Oathkeeper Svenfarv 73. Marcus wasn't a hacker. He didn't know how to scrub metadata or reroute IP addresses. But he did know one thing: if you wanted people to pay attention, you had to make the truth impossible to ignore. He clicked upload. Then he wrote a caption: I was nearly shot for filming the truth. Now I'm showing you why. Protect implant, Bell files, not all cops but enough. He hit post. At first, nothing happened. Then, like a gust of wind through dry grass, the spark caught. Shares, retweets, comments. In 5 minutes, there were 200 views. In 10, over 2,000. By the hour mark, Marcus's inbox was flooded. Journalists, activists, old friends, strangers. Some thanked him. Some told him to stop. One email stood out, from a familiar name. Rebecca Lyon, senior correspondent, Atlantic News Network. Marcus, we're covering this. I want you to live at 8:30 tonight. No edits. You tell your story your way. Let me know if you're in. Rebecca. He hadn't spoken to Rebecca in 6 years, not since she covered the department's mishandling of a teen assault. Back then, she was silenced. But now the world had changed, or maybe just grown louder. He typed back, "Let's do it." That night, the segment aired. A soft-spoken anchor introduced him. Tonight, a former police officer turned whistleblower shares what he calls the most dangerous truth he's ever recorded. Then the screen split. Rebecca on one side, Marcus on the other, seated in front of a worn bookcase and a folded flag in a wooden frame. Rebecca. Marcus, what made you speak out now? Marcus, because the silence was too loud. And because I saw myself in the man who almost got framed. I saw my sons, my grandson. He played the key clip live. The object dropped into the trunk, the drawn gun, his calm declaration of who he was. The reaction was immediate. Twitter exploded. YouTube flagged the video for review, but it was too late. It had been mirrored to dozens of accounts, platforms, blogs. TikTok was flooded with reactions, duets, tears, rage. The nation was listening, but the country wasn't united. The next morning, local radio stations debated it with fury. One conservative caller said, "That's why cops hesitate, because they're afraid of being crucified for doing their jobs." Another countered, "You don't plant evidence unless you've got something to hide." At the diner, 2 booths away from Marcus's usual seat, he overheard, "He's a traitor. Nah, he's the only honest cop we've had in years." In his mailbox, an envelope with no return address. Inside, a photo of his house taken the night before. No note, no signature. The price of truth was getting higher. Marcus called Rebecca. "I need to go off radar for a while, just until I figure out the next move." She understood. "But Marcus, don't stop now. People are watching. People are waking up." He looked out his window, past the mailbox, past the streetlight, where his grandson once rode a bike too fast down the hill. "That's exactly why I can't stop," he said. "I just need to move smarter." That night, he uploaded another video. Just his voice, no face. "This is bigger than me. I've opened a door that won't close, and if they silence me, then you pick up the camera. You carry it forward. This fight isn't about going viral, it's about going honest. I'm still here, still watching, and I know you are too." The video ended with 4 simple words on a black screen. "Truth is a relay." Marcus powered off the laptop, checked the locks on the doors, and sat down with a notebook. The next step wasn't about exposure. It was about building something stronger than silence. A network, a movement, not just of cameras, but of conscience. And he knew this storm hadn't reached its peak yet. But when it did, he'd be ready. The messages started small. A private DM, an anonymous email, a single sentence. "I saw what you did, I believe you." But then came more. "I'm a rookie officer. What they told us at the academy doesn't match what I see on the streets. My dad's a cop. He says you're lying, but I watched the video, and I don't think you are. How do I speak up without losing everything?" Marcus read every message, carefully, slowly, sometimes with tears in his eyes. Not out of pain, but of recognition. The echo was growing. He hadn't set out to start a movement. He wasn't trying to be a hero, but truth has a way of bouncing until it lands in the hands of those ready to carry it. That Sunday, he received a video file from an unfamiliar account. No name, no context. He hesitated, but curiosity won. He pressed play. A young officer, early 20s, sat in his cruiser, eyes bloodshot, voice shaking. "Sir, if you're watching this, I need to tell someone before I lose my nerve. My supervisor told me to change a report last week. Said it was too detailed. The body cam didn't accidentally turn off. He switched it off, then claimed the guy resisted. But he didn't. He cried, he begged, and they still slammed him. I've got the backup file. I saved it, but I'm scared. They'll know it was me. You were a cop. You know what it's like to choose between your badge and your soul." Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. He remembered that same moment years ago, when silence was the safer choice. But silence never healed a wound, it only buried it. He replied, "You don't have to go public. Not yet. Just keep the file safe. I'll help you find a path, one step at a time." Later that evening, he went live again. No video, just voice. "Tonight's not about me, it's about the ones still inside the system, who know what's wrong and want to make it right. To every young officer listening, your duty is not to a department, not to a nameplate. It's to the people, the truth, and your own humanity. If you've ever felt your stomach turn because of something you were told to write, sign, or ignore, then listen to that voice. That voice is your compass." Within 48 hours, over 19 officers from 6 different states had reached out. Some shared redacted documents. Others offered anonymous testimony. One simply wrote, "You said what I was too afraid to say. Thank you." But Marcus knew danger wasn't gone. He received another threat, this one more direct. A message slipped under his windshield wiper at the grocery store, scrawled in thick black marker, "Retire quietly, or we'll bury you loud." Marcus didn't flinch. He'd faced worse. Instead, he took a photo of the note and posted it with a caption, "When the truth scares them more than a lie, you know you're on the right side." A few days later, a letter came in the mail, handwritten, careful penmanship. It was from a woman named Gloria, age 74, from Minnesota. "Mr. Bell, I'm not good with computers, and I only saw your video because my grandson showed me. But I needed to write you the old-fashioned way. My husband was a police officer for 35 years. He passed in 2011. He would have respected what you did. He once told me, the hardest part of wearing the badge is knowing when to stand apart from it. I think you've done that, and I want you to know you're not alone. With hope, Gloria R." Marcus held the letter like it was made of glass. He whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular. Because sometimes the echo doesn't come in waves. Sometimes it arrives in whispers, in handwritten notes, in scared young voices behind dashboards, in courage that doesn't shout, but stands. And Marcus knew more than ever the tide was shifting. The people were finding their voice, and truth was finally starting to speak louder than fear. They say a storm doesn't ask permission before it arrives. It just shows up, uninvited, unapologetic. By Monday morning, the national media had picked it up. NBC, CNN, Fox, each with its own spin. Retired cop exposes systemic corruption in local departments. Whistleblower or liar? Former officer sparks controversy. Marcus Bell, hero or agenda-driven troublemaker? The country was watching. The comments flooded in. This man should run for office. He's making our officers look bad. Truth hurts, and that's why we need it. Fake, edited footage. He's paid by radicals. Marcus didn't answer most of it. He knew the truth rarely comes without bruises, but it was harder than he thought to watch his name become a battleground. Rebecca Lyon called again. "There's something you need to see." She sent a link, a morning segment on a national talk show. The guest? Sheriff Glenn Rutledge, the very man who had dismissed the original officer's misconduct as a misunderstanding. "Mr. Bell has a long-standing grudge against this department," Rutledge said smoothly. "He's using doctored footage to push a narrative that fits his personal vendetta. He's not a journalist. He's a bitter ex-employee with a camera and a YouTube channel." Marcus stared at the screen. Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound. "So this is what they do," he thought. "They rewrite the story, make the one holding the mirror seem like the monster." But the storm didn't stop there. 2 days later, he received a certified letter from the local prosecutor's office. Subpoena notice. Appearance required, State of Georgia versus unknown officers. The system wasn't just watching, it was responding. At the courthouse, the mood was tense. Reporters lined the sidewalk. Protesters stood with signs. "Film the police. Justice for the silenced. Support good cops. Expose the bad." Inside, Marcus testified before a grand jury. He showed the footage, answered every question, described every detail. But he knew truth in a courtroom isn't always the same as truth in real life. And after 6 hours, he walked out to find his tires slashed. The cameras caught that too. That night, Marcus sat alone in his kitchen, light flickering overhead. He turned on his recorder, not for an upload, but for something deeper. A message. Some people think this story is about me. It's not. It's about a system that gave me a badge and then expected me to protect it more than I protected the people. It's about the kids who grow up thinking police are heroes until they meet the wrong one. It's about the good cops, yes, the good ones, who stay silent out of fear of losing a pension, a promotion, a future. And it's about you, watching, listening, deciding which side you are on, not politically, not left or right, but truth or convenience. He paused, then continued, voice lower. Tonight, I received a message from a retired officer in Michigan. He said he was ashamed of what he allowed and proud of what I've done. That's what gives me hope, that even now, when the storm breaks and the winds howl, there are still people who choose to stand. The video went up, and in less than 24 hours, it crossed 2 million views. More stations picked up the story. Senators began tweeting. One called for a federal oversight committee on small-town law enforcement. Another accused Marcus of inciting anti-police sentiment. But Marcus wasn't trying to start a war. He was trying to end a cover-up. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Unknown number, late at night, he let it go to voicemail. The message was short, a male voice, calm, clipped. You think this ends with you, Belle? This started long before you, and it will outlast you. Sleep with one eye open. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt fear. Not for himself, but for everyone who'd stood beside him. He locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and sat in the dark, thinking. The storm had broken, but the flood had just begun. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus last uploaded a video. In internet years, that was a lifetime. Speculation grew. Some said he'd been silenced, others believed he went into hiding. But Marcus wasn't gone. He was watching, he was listening, and he was healing. He had moved temporarily to a small cabin outside Savannah, surrounded by pine trees and slow rain. No cameras, no headlines, just silence. The kind that didn't accuse, didn't threaten, just existed. He spent his mornings reading old case files, his afternoons answering letters, some typed, many handwritten, from people who said his courage had helped them find their voice. And in the evenings, he'd sit on the porch and stare at one particular light. A porch light across the hill, always on, always steady. He didn't know the people who lived there, but the light became a kind of comfort, a quiet reminder that someone somewhere was still awake, still watching, still hoping. One night, he decided to record again. No fancy setup, no background music, just his voice and the quiet hum of the night. I didn't come here to be a symbol, he began. I came here to be a man who could sleep at night. And if you've followed this story, if you've watched all the noise and spin and anger, I hope you've seen something else too. The badge isn't the enemy. The camera isn't the answer. Conscience is. Because systems don't break overnight, and they don't heal overnight either. But every time someone speaks, every time someone listens, we leave a light on for the next person who's lost in the dark. He paused. You could hear a pine branch snap in the wind. I've heard from young officers who now carry 2 notebooks, one for the bomb, one for the truth. I've heard from grandmothers who said, I never trusted a man with a camera until you reminded me what decency looked like. And I've heard from kids, black, white, Latino, from cities I'll never visit, who said, I didn't know I could say something when something felt wrong. That's why I spoke, not to go viral, not to fight cops, but to remind America what it feels like to be honest, even when it costs you. Marcus looked down, then up at the camera, eyes steady, voice gentle, but unwavering. If you're hearing this, if this is your first time watching or your 50th, remember this, the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more courage. So ask yourself, what do you stand for when no one is watching? Because someone always is, a neighbor, a child, a stranger, a future you haven't met yet. Be the light they see. He ended the recording with no outro, no dramatic fade, just silence. Then uploaded the video with the title, One Light Left On. And in the description, he left a message. If this video moved you, tell me where you're watching from. Leave a comment, let me know your story, not because I need followers, but because the truth needs witnesses. We all do. That night, thousands responded, from veterans in Texas, from nurses in Pennsylvania, from retired judges in Montana, from janitors, teachers, single moms, and young cops still afraid to speak, and from one man in Detroit who wrote, My father was a cop. He died believing in the badge. I almost lost faith in it until I found your videos. Thank you for being the light I didn't know I needed. Marcus sat on his porch, reading the words one by one. The cabin was dark behind him, but in front of him, Across the hill, that same porch light still burned, soft, steady, never out. And Marcus knew maybe the story was ending, but the movement, it had just begun. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet act of refusing to look away. So if you've seen something that moved you, speak, share, stand, and leave the light on for the next soul trying to find their way.